right, today's video, the third part on commercial agriculture. We will wrap up. Well, I started to say we'll wrap up. There'll still be one kind of anomaly of commercial agriculture that we will be talking about in tomorrow's video. We got two more types to talk about today. Let's review our map so far. Remember, you have to know the where and you have to know the why. Well, anytime with agriculture, the why has to do partially with climate, soil, where you can grow or raise certain things, and then also somewhat economics 101 in today's world. We're, close to the market and stuff like that. So in review, this purple area right up here around the Great Lakes and western, northeastern, I guess that's the bad way of putting it, Great Lakes area, part of the northeastern area near the Great Lakes, that is the dairy industry. This area right here in the Corn Belt, Iowa area, that is going to be the mixed crop and livestock, where they fatten up the animals by feeding them all the corn they grow in this area. This is where our slaughterhouses are at. A lot of our meat processors are in this part of the country. Then these areas here are grain production areas. Remember, this is the Great Plains. This is the spring wheat because it's planted in the spring, and this is the winter wheat because it's planted just before the winter. And a lot of big companies own farms in both locations. There's not a lot of people in these areas. Remember, the trend in American agriculture and any MDC is less farms, bigger farms, less farmers, more production. Very important. You know those things. I keep repeating them for a reason. Then over here in this pink, that is livestock ranching. That is where beef cattle are being raised and later will probably be sent over here to the feed area and the feedlots. So if you're looking for density of beef cows, this is actually going to be your hotspot. This is where they are raised out on the marginal land where they're able to have cheap land to let the cattle graze until they're ready to get them ready for slaughter. Okay. We are now to our fifth region. It's the one over here that is in green. You see parts of it over here on the coast, and, well, particularly this part right over here. And this is something in an agricultural region that we call Mediterranean agriculture. Mediterranean agriculture. Mediterranean agriculture requires a certain type of climate. Mediterranean climate makes it easy to remember. And, of course, Mediterranean climate just might get its name from the Mediterranean Sea. There are only a few spots in the world where the Mediterranean climate is present. One of them is all the area within like 50 to 100 miles of the Mediterranean Sea. So Southern Europe, Israel, Lebanon, and North Africa. But also we have some in the United States because of the way the water influences the West Coast in California. So California and parts of Oregon are areas of Mediterranean climate. Also, you find some in Chile. Now, think geography. Look where Chile is in the southern hemisphere. Doesn't it have the same geographic attributes as California and Oregon? Water on its west coast at about the same latitude, same climate. And then, of course, North Africa, but also very South Africa. Like the very southern end in the country of South Africa, there's also Mediterranean, and there's some also in Australia. Notice again the latitude connections to these places and the water influence. Here's what you need to know. Mediterranean climate is very unique, as you can see from the lack of places that have it. Certain crops thrive in these conditions. So because of that, it is very important for these places to be able to grow these crops because they can make a lot of money on them, because most places in the world can't grow these crops. All right, very important. So what is a Mediterranean climate that is so unique? Well, Mediterranean climates have dry and rather mild summer times. Look here, summer is dry, but it's also usually not that hot, but it's dry. And the landscapes are often mountains, ridges, kind of rough. Whereas the winter time, it doesn't say it on here, but the winter time is moist and mild, not real cold. Most of your precipitation comes in the winter. So crops that do not need a lot of water, matter of fact, it's bad for them, but they need enough moisture in the soil to be able to thrive. Those are the crops that do well in this kind of climate. So you're thinking California, you're thinking some of these other places. And to be quite honest with you, don't underestimate California's importance in agriculture. Most people are shocked to hear this, But you know what the number one agriculture state is in the U.S.? It's California. California sells more products agriculturally, price-wise, than any state in America. They have dairy farms, they have some grain farms, and they have a whole lot of this, Mediterranean agriculture. All right? So what grows well when you have a dry summer and a rather moist, mild winter? Well, olives, grapes, nuts, fruits, vegetables, certain fruits and vegetables, and also winter wheat. Now, for winter wheat and some of these fruits and vegetables, these climates don't have quite enough water. So what do? Technology, possibilism, irrigate. Irrigation allows crops like fruits and vegetables and winter wheat to be grown in these drier areas and flourish. Now, a criticism, a concern of this kind of agriculture, please put this in your notes. It can be very hard on the environment, especially if you're irrigating in a land that doesn't have a lot of water. That is one of California agriculture's biggest problems. They are growing lots of crops. They are growing them on marginal land, meaning it's very dry, and they're getting good production, but they're tapping into a water supply that's already challenged. A lot of people live in California. There's a lot of uses of water there, and the water level has been going down in many of those areas for years. So environmentalists, neo-Malthusian-like, are concerned about the overuse of water supply in these Mediterranean climates. They're doing the same thing in North Africa, in places like Egypt. All right, it's a concern there as well. So big time concern. Olives and grapes, stuff like that, they pretty much flourish naturally. You don't have to irrigate them quite as much. But these other crops, there's a need for irrigation, and that's a concern. In America, look at California here. One of the concerns we have in America with agriculture involves Mediterranean big time. While California produces a lot of these crops, a lot of the best land farmers in America are losing. So America is in no grave danger of running out of farmland. We have a lot of it. We're very fortunate to have a lot of it. But what we are in danger of, and this is real serious, is our best land some of you are now living on. And I say that in a generic way. A lot of our best farmland in America are now subdivisions. And so what are farmers doing in these large farms? They're buying and purchasing land that is marginal. It's dry. It's not ideal, but they'll use technology to make it work. Well, can we sustain that? Is this sustainable? Another great question to put in your notes and ask yourself and think about how you might argue it might not be sustainable, and here's why not. Or how might we deal with technocrats? How might we adjust to it? Think about the technocrats, the neo-Malthusians right now, the Malthusians, the Bozarupians. Review those, please. Great time to review those. But we seriously do have a challenge in the United States of our high-quality farmland is being lost to the growth of cities and suburbanization. Initially, irrigation helps with this, but does it just create other problems? That is a question. Now, notice something else about these areas. For some of you, this might help you remember, because you got to know your maps. One of the things I'm asking of you today, it's on Schoology, is to study the maps on OneNote of the U.S. agriculture and the world's agricultural regions. Wine production. Think about what countries are known for their wine production, or what areas of countries. France, Italy, California. Why? Wine is made mostly from grapes. It makes sense to produce the grapes near where you're producing, or where you're, mark that out. It makes total sense to produce the wine where you are producing and growing the grapes. It's a saving of money. It's just like fattening up the cattle and the pigs near where the corn's being grown. You cut down on your transportation costs, which we'll be talking about later this week. Okay, so that's an easy way. What areas are famous for wine production? France, Italy, South Africa has some. California has some. Those areas have Mediterranean agriculture because they grow grapes easily. Now, yes, you can grow grapes in Tennessee, but it's going to be a challenge, and you're going to have to irrigate a whole lot, and it's not very natural. So this is the Mediterranean climate. Tomatoes, potatoes, other vegetables, cabbage and lettuce and broccoli and stuff like that. All that can be grown here too. So major food producing. Think about this. California obviously has a big population. So their fruits and vegetables, they're usually not going to ship them from the East Coast. They're going to get a lot of theirs from this area right here. You may eat some stuff that's grown in California. Probably most of our stuff comes closer to here, but occasionally you might eat some from here. So again, distance does matter because, and this is important, as we'll talk about with the next type of agriculture, fruits and vegetables, along with milk, is what we call a perishable product. Perishable products are those that will go bad. They will spoil. And milk will spoil. So will fruits and vegetables. They have a perishability date. They're only good for so long. That is a very important geographic concept. Know it. Perishable products. They're products that need to get to the market and the consumer as soon as possible because they have a date where they're not any good anymore. And you'll notice that. If you've ever had, again, soured milk, or if you've ever had a fruit or vegetable that you've tried to eat and it's starting to go rotten, you find out really quickly. Also with fruits and vegetables, they're perishable because any type of bruising or damage can be the end of them right away. And then I have these two other terms that you definitely need to review: extensive and intensive agriculture. We've been mentioning them on every video. They are extremely important. Sometimes you will get asked questions about which of these types of agriculture are more extensive. Other times it may be, describe an intensive focused type of agriculture. So what's more extensive, livestock ranching or Mediterranean agriculture? I'll pause so you can think. And if you need more time, pause the video and see if you can come up with the answer. But now I'm going to give you the answer. Extensive agriculture is use of a lot of land. What uses more land? Livestock ranching or Mediterranean agriculture? Livestock ranching uses more land. So livestock ranching would be the more extensive type of agriculture. Keep practicing this stuff. It is very important. All right, a couple of things. Mediterranean agriculture. Here is a map of Mediterranean agriculture around the world. You'll see it around the Mediterranean, Western U.S., Chile. And by the way, Chile being in the southern hemisphere. Chile being in the southern hemisphere is an area that is obviously opposite seasons to us. So right now they're going into fall while we're going into spring. So we buy a lot of our vegetables and fruits from Chile in the United States. So if you go to get fresh fruits and vegetables in the grocery store in America in January or February, there's a good chance this is where they're coming from. And by the way, that's what we call a complementary relationship economically. And that is a very, very good thing for Chile economically to sell their fruits and vegetables to North America during our winter time. Also, South Africa, and then there's parts of Australia. Here is what Mediterranean agriculture might look like. Notice a lot of one crop. That's one of the qualities of commercial agriculture, is specializing in one or two crops on a farm. And again, there's probably irrigation that's going on here as well. All right, let's move to our last agricultural type for today. It is called fruit and vegetable farming. And it's also sometimes called truck farming. It's commercial gardening and fruit and vegetable farming, or truck farming. Its locations are the U.S. Southeast, which we are in either in this or on the edge of this, depending on who you ask. To be technical, most agriculturalists label East Tennessee as a generic farming region. And that's just the way of saying we have a little bit of everything. We do have quite a bit of this. We used to have dairy farming. We don't have much of that anymore. We have a little bit of mixed crop and livestock here in East Tennessee. So that's why they call it a generic farming area. But U.S. Southeast, New England, near cities around the world, that's an important part, near cities around the world. So basically, the east coast of the United States, and then areas near cities, because commercial fruit and vegetable farming is about growing perishable products. Look at some of the description here. The type of crops grown, like tomatoes, which are grown around here, high profit. I know people who spend $250,000 a year in Granger County to set out their crops of tomatoes. Now, their hope is they make that money back and more, but it is expensive to get into, but there is a way to make some big profits because these crops are in high demand. So they're high profit vegetables and fruits. Why? Because these things are demanded by wealthy urban populations, middle class and above. Guys, think about it. How many people today like fresh fruits and vegetables? How many want to see really fresh fruits and vegetables? Think about the grocery store. Think about the guy on the side of the road or the lady on the side of the road that's selling fresh fruits and vegetables and how much business they do. People want fresh. People also worried about health concerns, the big health kick in recent years. This makes this be in higher demand. So with that in higher demand, this makes more profit for people in this kind of agriculture. But it's expensive to get started. Also, this explains why this kind of agriculture will take place near cities more. Now, let me explain geography. These crops are perishable. They need to be grown pretty close to where they're going to be eaten. So it does make sense that tomatoes are famous in this part of the world, Granger County, for instance, because think about Knoxville, but not only Knoxville and Morristown, but think about how easy of a truck drive it is to Philadelphia, or Cleveland, Ohio, or even New York City. So it's a rather short distance to get these crops to major American cities and marketplaces. Apples, cherries, lettuce, tomato, again, on and on and on. They want the food, so the farmers try to demand it or try to supply the demand. Now, one thing that's different about this kind of farming, this is a pretty intensive, intensive type of agriculture. If you've ever helped a relative garden before, you will have known that in a good garden, it doesn't take a large amount of space to produce a lot of a vegetable. If your crops do well, you can produce a whole lot of stuff in a very small area. So with that being the case, these places that are growing fruits and vegetables, if they're close to cities, the land is going to be more expensive. It's something we call bid rent theory that I'll teach you about in a few days. But they can afford that if they're going to get a good price for their fruits and vegetables. Also, if the land is expensive, these farmers don't have to buy as much of it because, like a garden, they can get a lot out of a little bit of really good land. All right, so these are perishable products that are intensively produced. Very important terms there. One problem, though, that these types of farms encounter is mechanization. The use of machines, which is so common in commercial agriculture today, cannot be used as much on these farms. They can be used some. Some machines can be used. But think about using a machine to harvest a fruit or a vegetable. What if you bruise it? What if you damage it? You've ruined everything. So there has to be a lot of manual labor, a lot of people working in the field, which increases the cost of production, which is one reason why fruits and vegetable crops are so expensive to buy in the stores, in the supermarkets. All right. So what that means is you're looking for laborers on those farms. And in this part of the country, back in the 1980s and 90s, it was very common for local farmers to seek illegal labor, illegal immigrants who had moved into the country because they didn't have to answer to what they're paying them. They would pay them below minimum wage. The workers would get more money than they were making back in their home country. And then the farmers would be able to pay for cheaper labor and make more money at the end of the day. That was very common in this area, not just this country, in this area of the U.S. 25 years ago. This is also one of the reasons Morristown became a hub of a lot of immigration from Hispanic countries like Mexico. The first reason many of them came to this area, one, yes, was NAFTA and factory jobs, but even before that was to work on farms in this area and work for cheaper labor than a lot of the people around here would work for. So with stricter laws on immigration, it means farmers will have to pay workers more, which means our food prices likely go up, and they have on most items. Where are these types of things, types of farms at? Situated near urban markets. So they're going to be growing this stuff near the cities. So yes, New York, Upstate New York has a lot of this kind of agriculture, a lot of fruits and vegetables that are 30 or 40 miles away. Remember when we talked about dairies and how they used to be about 20 miles away from every city? Fruits and vegetables still are, for the most part. Up and down the East Coast, and then in California, you got the Mediterranean agriculture, which produces a lot of these same things. But to show you some other examples, whether it's cucumbers or lettuce or cabbage, now, again, some things can be harvested here. Lettuce can possibly be harvested in a way, or types of greens can be through equipment, but tomatoes can't be. Peppers can't be necessarily. It's going to take manual labor for that. Top fruit producing states in the U.S. and vegetables. All right, look at it. You should know California, Washington, Oregon, Mediterranean climate. But then look, New York, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Florida, Texas. What do they have in common? All are states with major cities in them. Numerous major cities. They have a lot of people to feed and a lot of people that want fruits and vegetables, so they produce them. Many of you are familiar with Florida. Florida's orchards. Florida can grow things in orchards, oranges, for example, that other parts of the country don't have the growing season for because they're in a subtropical, more tropical climate. It doesn't freeze as early in the fall. It doesn't freeze as early in the spring, I should say, or as early in the fall. And so therefore they can grow their products that other parts of the U.S. can't grow. So one reason Florida is known for its oranges and maybe apples to a certain extent is because they can grow things while other places just have no chance because of the seasons. So fruit and vegetable farming, where do you find it? Basically all throughout this eastern area and then other states where there are big cities. Again, this out here is not really what we call commercial fruit and fruit farming, vegetable and fruit farming, but it's more Mediterranean because it produces a lot of the same crops if they use irrigation. Also, one other thing about this type of farming, it is also called truck farming. Truck farming because the Latin word truck meant barter. Now, ironically, a lot of the stuff is then hauled in trucks to get it to the people who want to buy it. But that is very delicate. You got to have good truck drivers to deliver this kind of stuff because if they're not driving well, you're going to end up with some ugly messes that stink really bad and some products that are not worth anything once they knock them around in the truck and bruise them and all that kind of thing. So commercial fruit and vegetable farming, remember, all commercial farms are done for profit. They're done to mass produce, and they're done mostly in MDCs. MDCs means more developed countries, your stage 4s, stage 5s. Subsistence farming dominates stage 2s, and stage 3s are where you see subsistence and commercial beginning to mix and blend in. Remember when we talked about the Green Revolution, the third agricultural revolution? What that did is took a lot of stage 2 level countries and started introducing to them some level of some commercial farming mechanisms. So let me know if you have questions. Work today on studying your maps of agriculture along with continuing to practice FRQs. Tomorrow we'll talk about a unique type of agriculture called plantation agriculture and then introduce some other types as well. So some interesting stuff coming tomorrow, some real good videos coming up, YouTube videos over the next few days as well.